Well, I'm sure you heard by now, the Bears lost. But it's okay. They lost. There's a lot of controversy of how they lost or why they lost, and they're blaming receivers at the end of the game for not catching the ball. Mind you, the receiver that has caught some serious passes to even get us to that point. Not to mention that how many drop passes happened during that game. The Bears look like the team that played in the warm city, and the Rams look like the team that played in the cold city, because the Rams didn't drop many passes, if any, at all, while the Bears were dropping them all over the place. So shouldn't even gone in overtime. Like, Rome dropped a pass right in the end zone right at the beginning of the game on the opening drive. Like, that kind of sets the tone for the entire game. And that kind of is a little microcosm of like the Bears season. Good enough to be in the right spot, just not good enough to cash in. It's kind of how the game ended. It's kind of the whole season. They were good enough to go to the Super Bowl, but they just couldn't put the little pieces together to get them past the Rams. But, that's what it is. But I didn't want to focus too much on just the depressing way the game ended. I want to talk about how, for my family and for many families across this city and the country for that matter who love the Bears, because the Bears are, they're the founding franchise. They've been around for the longest time, and they have fans all over the world. They were showing videos when they beat the Pack. They were showing videos all week of like people celebrating because the way that they beat the Packers was incredible, right? And they're showing people in Australia, they're showing people in Europe, they're showing people in Miami and Los Angeles, and it was really a great thing to see, because I feel like, I don't know, there's something about the Bears and Chicago for that matter. And when our city does well, the whole country notices and the whole world gets excited. When the Cubs won in 2016, it was an incredible moment in American sports history because the world was captivated by it. More so than the Red Sox, I would say, more so than the White Sox. They're the Cubs. They were the team that hasn't won a World Series in 108 years, and then they go ahead and do it. I mean, the ratings for the World Series that year were the highest they've ever been in its history. And certainly not the case when the Dodgers are in it, if you know what I'm saying. So, and even more so with the Chicago Bears. And I say that not because I'm just a meatball Chicagoan fan, even though I am wearing a Cubs shirt and Bears hat, but think about the Saturday Night Live skits that happened in the 80s when you were talking all things Bears, when the Bears were making their Super Bowl run and their NFC championship runs and all that stuff. People forget they were good after that season, and they were good prior to that season. So it was and hopefully that's the case with this team. But you have that super fans, the Sworskis or whatever they're called, on Saturday Night Live with Bears and all of those skits, right? And they kind of came up and populated a little bit as the Bears were decent and went to the Super Bowl in 2006 and then 2011 when they were making their run against the Packers and they lost in the Pack, and bubbled up again a little bit in 2018. And you have all these online entities that do all of these like super fan things. Like, there's not another team, I would argue there's not another team in sports right now that have the kind of following that the Bears do when they do well. Because when they're not doing well, they have a great following. But when they do well, I mean, these super fans, and they were out when the Bears were bad, but when they got Caleb, there's all these like bands that put out specific Bear songs, or there's these, influencers on TikTok or Instagram or what have you that put together different songs that are parodies of the Bears games, and they do them weekly. One guy in particular does them weekly here in Chicago, and he was featured like in pre-games and stuff like that for Bears games. I don't know. I just think it's cool, and that's what like it represents. Them doing well represents the best of Chicago. And all week long, people have been talking about it, and the way I can describe the way that they lost, like, it's like, unrequited love is what my wife called it. It was like getting dumped with no explanation, and they're just gone. That's what it felt like when the season was over, because it was such this buildup. It was this momentum. It was this journey that started in like April of last year with OTAs and the new coach. Let's effing go. And then you have the training camp, and then you have the start of the season, and they weren't great at the start, but then they started winning games that they shouldn't have won on blocked field goals and blowing out the Cowboys at Soldier Field. Like, and then, all these games where they just kept finding ways to win. And, in that time, the Cubs were like making their run in the playoffs and they were doing their thing. And as the Cubs kind of faded away because they blew it in the playoffs, the Bears rose to the occasion at the perfect time when other teams were just not doing anything in Chicago. The Bulls kind of, the Blackhawks have been playing better. I will give them that. But the Bears just kept winning and kept winning, and it became appointment viewing television again. And that might be lost on a whole generation of people who don't know what that means. But back in the day, appointment television, appointment viewing for television was like Friends on Thursday nights, 7 o'clock, or 7:30, whatever the case may be. Seinfeld was on at 7, Friends was on at 7:30, Mad About You was on at 8, like back in the day, right? That was like the all-star lineup. That was appointment viewing. The Bears became appointment viewing. You structured your weekends around when the Bears game was. And that didn't happen for the last 5 or so years because you would be like, oh, well, Aunt Bethany's got a 100th birthday. We can go. The Bears are on, but they suck. I can just watch on my phone. That changed this year. It went from the Bears don't suck, and it went to I don't care what you got planned. We're not doing it at noon on Sunday or at 3:30 on Sunday. And especially during the playoff run, like people were having parties where I was like, I don't think I can come. I'm going to the game, or I'm going to be at home in my layer of contempt to suffer through this game because you want to believe so badly that they'll win, and then you're afraid that your heart will be broken because we're Bears fans. That's what's been going on for our entire lives as Bears fans. So you were really terrified of that. You didn't want that to happen. But you got your comfort food and you're eating the things and they win and they keep winning and they made the run through December where they beat the Packers regular season. And then you find out 3 weeks later you're playing them again in the playoffs, which is also, it's your worst nightmare as a Bears fan and the most exciting thing as a Bears fan. And they won. They beat them. And, there's the Packers fans who are like, well, the Packers then, blah, blah, blah. They beat them. They beat them. Last time I checked, DJ Moore wasn't injured. Neither was Caleb Williams on that touchdown that the Packers had their full defense out there. I know Micah Parsons was in the game, but you had everything else out there and you blew it. So that was an incredible game. And what that did for our city, it made everybody like each other again. It's been so polarizing since the pandemic. People kind of looking out for each other. I mean, people are like letting people on the Kennedy, you jockey for position on the Kennedy where, you have the ramps coming in, where people are coming on the on-ramps and stuff like that. Nobody wants to let you in because everybody's in rush hour and everybody's just pissed and they want to go home. Well, during this run, people are like, come on in, man. Let the 7 other cars, you down there, come on in. People are enjoying it. People are saying hi. I was in a Costco and I got Bears randomly. And then another part of Costco, I got a guy who looked me up and down because I had a Bear sweatshirt on. He looked me up and down and he just goes, Bear down. Like that doesn't happen anywhere else. Not like that. And my daughter, who is 16, who has fallen in love with what it's like to be a Bears fan this year. Like this is her coming of age season, if you will, of Bear fandom. I talked to her today right before this call here, and I asked her, how you doing, with the Bears, and she's like, did you crash out because all you put was damn? And I did, because that's how I felt. I was like, damn, it's over. And that's what she said. She's like, I'm not necessarily upset they lost. Now, of course, would we want them to win? She's like, yeah, but that was so incredibly fun. It was magic, and that is something, even if they win the Super Bowl next year, it won't be quite like this year, because this year it was years and years and years of failure, an epic failure. I mean, hello, last Thanksgiving game, of the Matt Eberflus era. Okay. That was epic failure bad, So in a way, this Bears season kind of felt like the 2015 Cubs. You went all that way. You had all this magic happen where you were thinking the gods were finally going to open up their purse strings a little bit and grant you what you've been wanting for the most part of your entire adult life. And in 2015, it was a World Series run, right? And they got pretty damn far. They got to the NLCS and they blew it against the Mets. They just stopped hitting and they couldn't hit anymore. But then 2016 happened and they won the whole damn thing. That feeling, though, that season, I remember when the Cubs lost that game against the Mets at City Field. I was so pissed at baseball. I didn't watch the World Series. I barely watched the beginning of the season. The only reason why I watched the first game because I was in California when the Cubs opened up against the Angels that year. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have watched because I was still pissed at baseball because I thought this isn't fair. Like again, we lose again. I didn't have that feeling though with the Bears of the again we lose thing. I got more of, man, I missed that ride. That ride was magic. That 2015 ride to them be like everybody going, "Oh, they're good." That's like what the Bear season was, and I'll miss that. And I'll miss that incredibly because it hasn't happened very much. It hasn't happened in a long damn time where people were that excited. And let's be honest, we haven't had a quarterback like this in like Jim McMahon. And I'm not saying that Caleb is as good or Jim McMahon is as good as Caleb. I'm talking about the hype around a quarterback. Nobody has done what Caleb has done to the quarterback position since Jim McMahon. And if you're going to argue with me about Jay Cutler, it just wasn't, right? Like the guy wasn't. He didn't have personality. He didn't have pizzazz. He didn't have none of that. He was like a dud as far as his personality. Now the guy can throw a ball 100 yards on a dime sometimes, but he just wasn't. He didn't have charisma like Caleb does. And I feel like Caleb's won the whole city over. And it became a thing. You know, the Wiener Circle gave out free hot dogs if the Bears scored 4 touchdowns, and they were going to give out free hot dogs for the Super Bowl parade. And they have a Ben Johnson lookalike contest. Like all these things started popping up. Like they had a Caleb Williams lookalike contest. They had a Ben Johnson lookalike contest on the Southwest side at a Moretti's in Bedford Park of all places. And the good, better, best became a thing. It was just such a good damn time. And you thought when they scored that touchdown, that throw that Caleb threw, that like wounded duck, where are you throwing it? I can't believe this is the way the season's going to end. Oh my God, he caught it. That was incredible. And you thought in that moment they were going to win. And of course, they drove down the field and they were 15 yards away from a field goal. And they throw a pass that just was ugly on every level. It just didn't look good. You know, whether or not Caleb threw an ill-advised pass or whether or not his receivers shouldn't have, were dogging the play or whatever, it just didn't work. And the season ended and it sucks. And I think that's what people are more upset about than anything is that they got their hopes up because they believed in this team, especially after that game-tying touchdown catch. You were like, there's no way we're losing this game now. We have all the momentum. And then we did. And it sucked. And it hurt a lot. It really did. It really sucked, man. You know, for somebody who's been a Bears fan his whole life, I'm 45, almost 46 years old. I was 6 years old, I should say, when the Bears won their Super Bowl. And faintly remember it. I faintly remember people being excited. I remember bed sheets that said Super Bowl on it. I remember the 85 Bears posters in my room, all of that stuff I had. And those were like, you know, like in the Sandlot, like Legends Never Die, that scene in Sandlot, like that's what those guys were to me, you know, walking around all these years after that, you know, they would pop out and they were all out. I felt like they were all out watching this game this past weekend, and they were bummed too, man. It was just like Chicago just kind of went like, back to reality. And now it's like -1 degrees on Friday. So that'll be fun. But I just wanted to, I don't know, just whoever is listening to thank them, whoever they are, that had anything to do with the Bears going on that run and people being good to each other in Chicago because of the Bears. It was just a lot of damn fun, man. And I hope we get to relive it all again next year and go all the way. And you know what? Who really wants to go to Super Bowl in San Francisco? You know, I'd rather go somewhere else. So we're going to have to do that next year. We're just going to have to do that, open it up. But I think next year is the year where you go see the Bears on the road, right? And maybe the Bears, you know, doing their thing in the beginning parts of their season and the Cubs will be doing their thing because they got Alex Bregman, which was announced that night with this Bears beating the Packers. It was just like an incredible night all around, right? So I feel like for the first time in a long time, Chicago sports might be on the rise, sans the White Sox, but you never know. You never know. The Blackhawks are playing better. Dare I say the Bulls are playing a little better, a little bit. But the Bears certainly are. The Cubs certainly pointed in that right direction. So hopefully we have a lot more of those runs because they have happened so far few between in Chicago sports that I hope that we finally get our due and we go on a run of the likes that we haven't seen since the Blackhawks and their run. I think we're due for that. So I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to get my feelings out, you know, do my little trust. pretty rad that the day after the game, Caleb and PCA, Pete Crow Armstrong, were at the Hawks game, and people were giving him a standing ovation there. I mean, only in this city will a team get a standing ovation for losing, and that's what happened when the Bears walked off the field. They were getting a standing ovation, and he got a standing ovation at the United Center the day that Jonathan Taves also got a standing ovation for coming back to the UC. So it's just a fun time in Chicago sports, and I just don't want to see it end. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Subscribe if you would, and I will talk to you later.